This is Friday, the 16th of June 2023, and this is a broadcast coming only on the internet under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo Editions, Khoodeelaar television channel, and I'm Muhammad Haque. I created and researched and wrote all the editions and posts since the creation of this program of broadcasting on the internet that began in 2020. And the baby angel Geronimo is the world's bestest baby angel Geronimo. And the baby angel Geronimo is blessed with the gift, a blessing of God. And baby angel Geronimo is the inspiration and the source of confirmation and verification. All the evidence of the wrongdoing and evil doing by the criminal Boris Johnson and his cabal. And when Boris Johnson was in post at number 10 Downing Street, also known as the Prime Minister, this evil liar aided and abetted and endorsed the already ongoing vilification and defamation campaign against the world's most innocent and perfectly healthy baby angel Geronimo the alpaca, living in South Gloucestershire, near England. Baby angel Geronimo was biologically born in New Zealand and was lovingly raised by the woman Leonie Walker, who admitted to the Times of London in August 2021 that she missed him. She was sad to let him go. The baby angel Geronimo is the name, spiritual name, physical name of a creature who has been the blessing to everyone who has been observing him, and through him, who the people that love him have found the inevitable degeneration of the kafir, Shan, evilness personification, Boris Johnson. As it says in the Holy Quran, let's see what we can find as the exact quotation in the surah. In the surah Al-Isra, the complete and authentic story of Al-Isra, Al-Miraj, the night journey and ascension, Innal batila kana zahuka. Innal batila kana zahuka.
وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا.
Truth has arrived and falsehood has perished, as falsehood is bound to perish. Now today's Fleet Street Shaitan, Al-Kuffar, Kafir, liars, concealers, hiders of the truth. Fleet Street in London, symbol of the so-called British newspapers. Fleet Street has got, in terms of the circulation, dominance in circulation, two titles: The Times, owned by the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch, and the Scum, owned by the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch. And the Scum has got the front page splash wall stick. That is supposed to be its moral position in denouncing the serial murderer Levi Belfield. For the serial murderer Evilness, Levi Belfield, to marry while he is in prison. And they are saying that there is fury over his £30,000 legal aid. We shall talk about legal aid in due course, but moving on to the next one is demands an engagement ring. So that's the main front page splash by the Evilness, owned by the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch. The dirty digger Rupert Murdoch, in my understanding, made his main billions by prostituting himself and running this prostitute newspaper, the Scum, which had for decades on page 3 the naked picture of a woman, young woman. The page 3 girl. Now, that is a measure of the brainwashing. The extent of the brainwashing to which the main population buying the newspapers was prone to and was kind of handled, if you like. And it's the Scum newspaper that gave him the monopoly for many, many, many years. And the Scum newspaper gave him the money, which he then used to go to America, where he invested the money in setting up what is now the Fox News. And the fact that he can pay in out of court settlement the equivalent of almost $1 billion in 2023 prices again is a measure of the money that he has made. So, dirty digger is not the appropriate phrase. The evil digger, criminal. The evil digger, criminal Rupert Murdoch, fiercely promoted the ideology and the narrative of the evilness called Donald Trump in the run up to the 2016 American so called presidential election. And the dirty digger was exposed during the proceedings of the so-called Levison inquiry during 2011-2012, when various victims of dirty diggers' traps, who included the sleazeball David Cameron and the evilness Tony Blair, it was exposed during the proceedings that his mall, that is his prostitute de facto, Rebecca Brooks, was the main contact for snaring evilness called Dave Cameron and the evilness called Tony Blair. And effectively, this prostitute, Rebecca Brooks, decided what line the scum would take politically at any UK so called general election. And it was the given thing for years. So, whatever the UK so called general public may think is going on, it's actually evilness called dirty digger Rupert Murdoch that actually has been deciding the political narratives and political agenda and the policies. What crisis there may be in the United Kingdom socially are directly traceable to the evilness Rupert Murdoch. So the reason why I am referring to this Levi Belfield as the main splash on the front page of this Scum today is because instead of running the same word, sick, about the evilness called Boris Johnson, they are running it about the evilness called Levi Belfield. Now, this is the wrong choice for justice, for truth. But essentially, innal batila kana zahuka, inevitably, falsehood would perish. And despite the fact that the scum doesn't say that, doesn't say that Boris Johnson is the liar, the evilness, the falsehood. The Daily Mirror does run the front page splash with the liar Boris Johnson and calls him liar. And the Guardian does a version. It is true that the facts of the last 24 hours confirm that Boris Johnson is the falsehood that has been exposed. And on the front page of the Times, Times today, reading End of the Road for Johnson. And in a opinion piece in the I newspaper that is owned and controlled by the Daily Mail, one of their kind of byliners, one of their so-called thinkers, within quotation marks, is saying something that I am looking for so that I can read the exact heading. So the one is this Ian Dunt, who is one of the racists. And this other one I'm looking for is Paul Waugh. And this is the one that I'm looking for, which comes nearest to saying that the shaitan has been brought down. So there are pieces by other writers, including by the political editor of the Spectator magazine, that Boris Johnson, the shaitan, once edited, Katie Bowles. And Katie Bowles, because she's part of the crowd that is still surrounded by Boris Johnson, kind of supporters and gangsters, she knows a bit more about the inside goings on than others. So she's written under the heading Prime Minister, that is Rishi Sunak, beware the martyrdom of Saint Boris. So what she's saying, there appears to be the beginning of a betrayal narrative coming. What she's saying, that Johnson is starting the narrative that he has been betrayed, and that is the threat that she is warning the Conservatives to be prepared for in political terms. Now, this is the one on page 21. It's under My View by Paul Waugh. And it says, disgraced big dog may be gone for good. Now, this is the only time that anyone has actually said as conclusively as this one that the political career that Johnson the liar has had so far is finally over. That's what Paul Waugh is saying. He's saying that Johnson spurned chances to save himself and then ran from voters. He couldn't see the utter public revulsion for his justifying a boozy leaving do. And there's a picture of this particular rule breaking event that has been the center or has been a central event, constituted the most hit exchange between the lying Johnson and the Privileges Committee inquiring into his breaking of the rules. So this is Innal Batila Kana Zahuka. People who don't believe in the Holy Quran, they don't have to believe in the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran and God don't expect those shaitans to believe or need the shaitans to believe. What the Holy Quran says is the truth, and it is the truth that comes. Innal batila kana zahuqa. And the shaitan, Boris Johnson, I mean, the pictures of the shaitan running somewhere near the woods, doing apparent exercises and waving at people. Now, what the fuck does he think he's waving at? This fucking cunt. Who does he think he's waving at? The shaitan has been found guilty of lying, of repeated lying to the parliament. The reason why it's important is because that is what the framework is in this country. So if the House of Commons, which is the main aspect or part of the UK Parliament, if the House of Commons had voted to set up this inquiry or this committee, whatever, then, as Penny Mordaunt said yesterday, the House of Commons refuse to carry out the findings, which is what the shaitan knew. When he was given a copy, advance copy of the publication of the report, which was published yesterday, he knew that he couldn't carry on lying. So what happened? He accepted the procedural job with one of the appointed agencies of the government. And the rule is, there is no written constitution, but that's the rule. If a member of parliament becomes an employee of the government, whatever capacity, then that is in conflict with their being a member of parliament. And that is the way to exit from the status as member of parliament, which is what he did. And as soon as he did that, accepted that, and all the findings of the report became applicable on him, to him. When the British Bangladesh profiteer, the Labour Party member of parliament, John Stonehouse, was eventually captured after he disappeared in Miami and was found in Australia and brought back to the United Kingdom. And he was tried and convicted in a criminal case of all kinds of lies. He had to be given the sack, but the tricky thing about the British Parliament and MPs is that you cannot sack a member of Parliament. So Stonehouse was given the job of what is called the Chiltern Hundreds. And that is the kind of job that is within the remit of the UK's sitting finance minister. And that is what Boris Johnson has done it with him, with himself. Essentially, what Murdoch's scum is saying is that the heading on the top right of this scum today, the assassination blast by Boris. Rupert Dirty Murdoch is still saying that Boris Johnson is innocent, and that by finding him guilty of the wrongs that he has done, the members of parliament appointed committee of privileges have committed assassination of his character. That's what Katie Bowles is talking about. That Rishi Sunak must be prepared for a campaign by Johnson, that he has been a martyr by the Privileges Committee. Now, in contrast to Levi Belfield and the liar Boris Johnson, there is another person in the news today which is ironic because the Times today carries an interview with Glenda Jackson, and it says the last interview she gave to any journalist. And it's a piece by Jenny Starner, which is a scoop, quite purely. Now, in contrast to the revulsion being openly expressed at Johnson's the lying, there is an outpouring of appreciation, recognition, respect for Glenda Jackson. Even the so-called conservatives are reluctantly paying tribute to her. Well, I noticed Glenda Jackson while she was an MP, and at the time I published comments about the particular issues that I saw her role as being morally compromised. But that's the worst that could be said about her. She was not a liar, as far as I can remember. And the I newspaper, which is controlled by the Daily Mail, has got the front page, three-lined splash. He lied and lied and lied. And that's a correct picture going with that one. Not the picture that the liar, Boris Johnson, pretends and pretentiously kind of stages. So, what happens with the various commentators commenting on Boris Johnson? Because this is an actual act. The publication of the report by the Privileges Committee confirming that Boris Johnson lied, and he lied to Parliament. It is quite possible to observe. It's quite possible to observe, but whether it cannot be guaranteed as being the thing that will definitely happen, but it can happen. So Johnson is now exposed on all sides, publicly at least. Although there are many things that he has been allowed to get away with. For example, the lying while he was in post as the mayor at the expense of London. He lied in order to facilitate various things to be done commercially by the woman he was physically unable to stay away from, Jennifer Arcuri, who said that he could not have enough of me and it was impossible to get away from him physically. Now, given the record of Johnson as the serial sex obsessed liar, Jennifer Arcuri has not exaggerated. And studying the various, although limited, number of video clips that contain both of them together, any reasonable observation would show that Johnson was very much submitting to the wishes and whims of Jennifer Arcuri. That means that he was overwhelmed by her, and the reason why he was overwhelmed by her was because he wanted her physically more than she wanted him. So the lies that he perpetrated to facilitate various abuses of the position of the mayor and the mayor establishment, to facilitate Jennifer Arcuri, those lies remain uncovered. Those lies remained not covered, not exposed, not published, not yet, not as far as I know. And the reason is not to do with any manipulations by Johnson. This is to do with the fact that the Labour Party on the Greater London Assembly and the Labour Party London, Labour Party nationally is morally corrupt. And when the Labour Party has got the political murderer of the Labour Party's founding aims and objects, Keir Starmer, in place, it is difficult to see a systematic, rigorous investigation of Johnson's misdeeds and misconduct and abuse while he was in post as mayor. He was there for 2 terms, 2008 to 2012, and 2012 to 2016, and it was the 2012 to 2016 years that he committed most of the misdeeds in relation to the benefits that Jennifer Arcuri used or needed. So that is one example of Johnson being allowed to get away. This and the other thing is that the Privileges Committee is also significantly different from any other committee or any other inquiry or any other probe looking into Boris Johnson's lie. Because the Privileges Committee has had numerically on the committee, the majority of the Privileges Committee that has been now featuring in the news have been conservatives. Not only that, in the personality or in the person of Bernard Jenkins, who has not been chairing the committee, it is the Labour Party's Harriet Harman that has been chairing the committee. But Bernard Jenkins, among the current crop of members of parliament from all sides, is in terms of chronology and in terms of consistency, is one of the most experienced and senior committee chairs, select committee chairs in the UK House of Commons. He has been since the conservatives were able to take advantage of the aimless Gordon Brown at the May 2010 elections. So Barnard Jenkins' presence significantly improved the objective appreciation of the role of the committee. And also, when in March Barnard Jenkins had to ask questions during Johnson's appearance before that committee, Barnard Jenkins came across as more intelligent, more rigorous than Boris Johnson did in his answers, in his excuses. So these things help significantly because, unlike that one, the so called investigation by the so called now former civil servant Sue Gray and the so called investigation by the London Metropolitan Police, both of those fell far short of the urgency and the rigor that both needed to show, and they didn't show. So, what I'm saying here is that innal batila kana zahuqa. This shaitan, Boris the Evil Johnson, abused his position as Prime Minister and allowed the vilification of baby angel Geronimo. And he allowed the vilification, demonization, defamation of the baby angel Geronimo against all evidence. He was like showing two fingers to the requirements of natural justice, the objective requirement for telling the truth. So he said that it was okay to vilify, to demonize the innocent baby angel Geronimo. And he said no to baby angel Geronimo's demands that he, baby angel Geronimo, should be allowed to be tested to check if he, baby angel Geronimo, was indeed ill with infections. Evil Boris Johnson said no. Evil Boris Johnson said no in collusion with the evil woman called Christine Middlemiss, who is supposed to be the so called chief vet. I call her thief vet. The evilness Christian Middlemiss and the evilness who was fronting the UK department for so called environment department, DEFRA, George Injustice Eustace. So between the three of them, these criminals denied the baby angel Geronimo the most basic, the most universal request. And they perpetrated the series of demonization, defamation, and lying against the baby angel Geronimo. And what the evilness Boris Johnson is now definitely going through is only a bit, not anything like the amount of the suffering and the pain that they plotted against the baby angel Geronimo by the lie. But the evilness Boris Johnson is showing sheer desperation, sheer lack of substance, sheer lack of foundation. And all these claims that his father, the evil Stanley Johnson, boasts about Boris Johnson's early years when he plotted to become the king of the world. How can this evilness be seen in the bracket as the king of the world? What exactly? What would he do notionally if it were the case that he became the king of the world? Since the world has been known to exist, there has been no king of the world. There cannot be. So this shaitan has come apart. He is not the king of the world. He is essentially what he has been always. He's a liar. And today, the 16th of June 2023, for the first time in the British print media, the evilness of Boris Johnson is being so widely reported, although not by every single outlet, but by more outlets than any time before. Because the Independent, for example, the I newspaper, not the Independent, the I newspaper, which says he lied, he lied, he lied. Well, let's see what the is it is the camera. That is what he said. He lied, and he lied. And the Times front page, the main big lettered headlines, big lettered headline is saying the end of the road for Johnson. Now, this one is focusing on Sunak. And it says Sunak allies claim Boris Johnson's political career is over after damning report says he held parliament in contempt 5 times. Now, the last kind of prime minister that had to take a definitive series of actions against a very populist conservative. It's Enoch Powell. And the prime minister in place was, or the leader of the conservatives was the late Edward Heath, whom the private eye called the grocer. And in contrast to his being called grocer, private eye used to call Margaret Thatcher the grocer's daughter, based on the grocery shop on top of which she grew up in Grantham in Lincolnshire. Margaret Hilda Roberts. And the grocer, Ted Heath, was the son of a carpenter, and he found himself seriously at odds with the very populist, racist Enoch Powell, a conservative member of parliament at the time. And Edward Heath had to get rid of this very serious diversion, being Enoch Powell. So the media and the people who actually are racists and have been racists and were racists at the time supported Enoch Powell, just as they are supporting, in a kind of manifestly decreasing fashion, they are supporting the liar Boris Johnson. But that's the nearest time. The nearest type of comparable confrontation between that conservative prime minister and a populist conservative member of parliament who has been found to have fucked up. The other thing that is similar to Enoch Powell and Boris Johnson is, of course, that both of them oppose the UK's closeness to other countries in Europe, known as also common market, the European Union later. Of course, with Johnson, nothing that he says is his position is the truth. But in the crucial moment of the referendum, staged over the UK's status as a member of the European Union, held in June this month, today, I think today, but we shall check that date actually, in 2016. The liar Johnson lied and said he was against Europe. Let's see what the European referendum date is. When was the date? So it took place on the 23rd of June, not 16th. And it says, so the results were 17,410,742, or 51.89% for Leave, and Remain was 16,141,241, or 48.11% to Remain. And there were 99.92% valid votes. Invalid or blank votes were 0.08%. Total votes cast 33%. No, total votes 33,577,342, and registered voters turnout was 72.21%. So that was 23rd of June 2016. Only today is the 16th, so 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 7 days. So Boris Johnson in 2016 pretended to take position for UK's leaving the European Union. But he also prepared a speech for remaining, for the UK to remain in the European Union, depending on what way the political particular movement went at that time. And there is this 2-3 page spread on these three people from Nottingham, murdered by this Evilness, who was a fucking student, for fuck's sake. Shit! Okay, there are 2 pages on this Times, so 2 pages 8 and 9. Johnson branded a liar whose claims mired him in contempt. And there is a subheading to the piece by Ian Martin, which is a comment, which says, Johnson sees the truth as a silly detail for lesser mortals. Now, that actually raises the question, what the fuck is this evilness compared to the lesser mortals? I mean, what kind of mortal is he, this shit? And I don't believe that, as compared to Powell, Johnson has got a chance. Because Powell, despite the fact that he was an evilness, lying through his teeth in his racism, on a personal level, Powell was not guilty of most of the things that personally Boris Johnson is guilty of. And there are letters, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letters in today's Times. And this is just for reference. I'm not attaching any particular significance to this, except the fact that this is a topical issue. And the three of them, the 5 letters, are of course all signed by European named individuals. And one of the first one is from the interim chief executive of an organization called Full Fact. And let's check what the Full Fact organization's interim chief executive is saying in the letter that appears in his name. As I said yesterday, Times letters are completely artificial. That the editors, the editorial policy for publishing letters based on racism and corruption, and it's not something that is momentary or momentous. But this letter from Andrew Dudfield, who is described as interim chief executive, Full Fact, in its conclusion that Boris Johnson misled Parliament, reports June 15, the Privileges Committee noted that the issue goes to the very heart of our democracy. Misleading misleading the House is not a technical issue, but a matter of great importance. And yet, as Prime Minister, Johnson was able to repeatedly make false and misleading claims in Parliament without consequence. He received 5 written warnings from the Office for Statistics Regulation and the United Kingdom Statistics Authority about his misuse of public data, and yet left Parliament having corrected the official record only once as Prime Minister. Closing the book on the Downing Street parties will not rebuild public trust. Only 5 out of 29 MPs whom Full Fact has asked to correct mistakes this year have actually done so. MPs need to get their house in order and fix Parliament's broken approach to corrections. And the second one, without any organization but just a name, Stephen Porter, London NW6, reads Boris Johnson has jumped before he was pushed, as have many police officers in the recent past, along with other officials who have been implicated in public scandals. This should not be allowed. It should be made mandatory that as soon as anyone is accused of any serious wrongdoing, they are prevented from resigning their post, even if they are suspended, until the investigation into their actions has produced its conclusions. By this means, individuals would be made to face the full consequences of that action, of their actions. That is Stephen Porter, London NW6. West Wales, Bognor Regis. I'll correct myself there. It's not West Wales, it's West Sussex. Bognor Regis was not in Wales. I knew that, but I didn't realize that before I read that. Suppose Boris Johnson drank a bottle of wine and was breathing. Now, read that again. Suppose Boris Johnson drank a bottle of wine and was breathalyzed while driving and found to be over the limit. Would his defense be that he was following the guidelines he was given? Millions of people fully understand. I'll read that again, this sentence. Millions of people fully understood and followed the deliberately simple social distancing rules without recourse to guidance of any sort. That, Boris Johnson says, he relied on guidance that was faulty, insults the intelligence of the British public. Hardly a route back to power. This is Bob Madams, Bognor Regis, West Sussex. The fourth letter is now that Boris Johnson's appalling honours list has crept through a seemingly toothless scrutiny process and wholly undeserving people are being elevated to the House of Lords, the thought that Nadine Dorries might resign was the only glimmer of light in the tunnel. Politics can be very cruel. That is Mark Benham, Beechingstoke, Wiltshire. And there is this one from Belgium. Surely Boris Johnson's greatest achievement is to have destroyed the Conservative Party. As a party member for more than 50 years, I no longer recognize anything about it that is conservative. Who can I vote for? This is Rodney James in Belgium. After his final defeat in 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte was forced into exile in the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he was guarded by members of the 53rd Shropshire Regiment of Foot. He remained there until his death in 1821. Maybe Boris Johnson could be forced into similar exile, but one less comfortable. Rockall, perhaps? The North Atlantic outpost, I'll read that again. The North Atlantic outcrop has the benefit that no soldiers would be needed to guard him or listen to his bombast. This is Anna Brown in Sheffield. Now, this is the sample of the opinion that, of course, today's edition of the Times London has decided to publish. There must have been hundreds of other letters. Essentially, the evilness Boris Johnson, as the Surah Al Isra says, Innal batila kana zahuqa. This evilness has come to disintegrate and perish even among his otherwise supporters. This shaitan must be destroyed and exposed for the liar that he is and has been. Now, what is Katie Balls is saying at page 11? Katie Balls is saying to Rishi Sunak, beware the martyrdom of Saint Boris. They are creating a martyr, warned one Boris Johnson ally ahead of the publication of the Privileges Committee report into whether the former Prime Minister knowingly misled Parliament over Partygate. The verdict from the MPs who make up that committee is that he did, with Johnson found guilty of multiple counts of contempt following evidence not just from the former Prime Minister but his staff at the time. In written evidence included in the report, a number 10 official recalls wine time Fridays and tells how staff were told to be mindful of the cameras outside. The recommended punishment of 90 days suspension, which will not happen now that Johnson has quit, is one of the highest in its history. Keith Vaz received 6 months for offering to buy drugs for sex workers. The fact that Johnson and his supporters have demeaned the committee and its MPs has only added to the level of criticism he has received. Not that Johnson is having much regret about it all. Right on cue, the former Prime Minister has popped up to dismiss it as a lie and political assassination. Who to believe? In a way, the report is unlikely to change many minds. And that's not just because your average voter is unlikely to sit down and read a 30,000 word parliamentary report. A poll by JL Partners in April last year found that when voters were asked to describe Johnson, the then Prime Minister, the most frequent word that was used was liar. For the bulk of Tory MPs, the episode served as a reminder of the reasons why they ousted Johnson in the first place: repeated scandal and cover ups. It wasn't just the series of alleged COVID breaches, but the way the Downing Street operation handled problems when they arrived. From misleading statements over Partygate to the dispute later down the line, Johnson's ally Chris Pincher and assault claims. But there is still a noisy contingent of Tory MPs and some 2019 voters who believe Johnson was wronged. The punishment of being pushed out of number 10 was enough, and the committee has overstepped the mark. Johnson's loudest supporters have made no secret of the fact that they believe the committee inquiry, which Johnson agreed to when he was in number 10, was rigged from the beginning, and no line in the number 100-page report is likely to change their minds. MPs who still actively support Johnson want the debate of the report to be held on Monday so that they can use it to defend their man. There is a lot that needs to be said, warns one such member of the 2019 intake. It's here that the scale of the punishment could play into Tim Johnson's hands. There appears to be the beginning of a betrayal narrative coming from this group. They want to tell the story of an election winning prime minister in 2019 who 3.5 years later was forced out of parliament and banned from stepping a foot back there as a result of hysterical journalists and MPs high on their own supply. It is whether Johnson should be banned from having the parliamentary pass to which former MPs are entitled that will be voted for on Monday. It is expected that the Commons will back the punishment, with many of Tory MPs planning to miss the vote. Johnson and his supporters will use the episode to drum up the idea that anti democratic forces are behind his downfall. There is now a chance for Rishi Sunak to try to turn the page with his many predecessors less of a distraction. But given that the political landscape is gloomy, he will have his work cut out. Allies of Johnson insist that it is a case of bidding their time before it makes a triumphant return. Just this week, Johnson said he would be back. With the parliamentary party filled with more foes than friends, it will probably take some time to return, regardless of whether or not he retains a common spouse. Now, that is the view of Katie Bowles, but obviously, this is a piece that has been written on the go, as it were. This is not a full fledged investigation into all the aspects, but essentially, she is one of the people that is in the know of what is going on with the Conservative Party because she is the political editor of the very conservative Spectator magazine. We shall be bringing an end to this particular part A of the broadcast at 8:38 GMT at 1 hour and 11 minutes on Friday, the 16th of June 2023.